Destiny 2 has an identity crisis. At first glance, the game appears to be a first-person shooter, but it's also an RPG, an MMO, and a looter shooter. The game is further subdivided into player versus player and player versus environment encounters. The company responsible for creating the game, Bungie, tries to balance Destiny with both PvE and PvP encounters in mind. They aren't separate, they are together. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to imagine that changing one thing on the PvE side might affect the PvP side, and vice versa. It also happens that the Destiny community is not split perfectly between PvP, PvE, and players who do both. Not to mention that the time investment and effort levels between players varies drastically. For instance, you have your casual player who has a very low time commitment to the amount of gameplay per week, but this does not mean that the casual gamer is not important, because the casual gamers account for the majority of video game sales, and without video game sales, I suppose we wouldn't have a video game in the first place. By contrast, the hardcore gamer commits a lot of hours per week to gaming. They're very vocal in forums and fan sites, and they'll at least get to the endgame. As for the casual content offered in games, the hardcore gamer will finish them faster than the developer can even have a chance to create new content. Within the subdivision of PvP and PvE in Destiny 2, you'll find hardcore gamers and casual gamers alike. Maybe one will just play PvE, maybe one will play PvP, maybe they'll do both. In addition, there is another subdivision of player types. We have gameplay purists and loot purists. Gameplay purists find high quality, fun gameplay enjoyable, with loot being the afterthought. They'll pretty much play a game until it stops being fun. Loot purists, on the other hand, prefer obtaining loot over anything. Remember, Destiny at its core is a looter shooter. Usually in gaming, rare loot is tied to difficulty or time investment, and we'll get to this in the next slide. In some games, there is an inherent game economy. In order to obtain a rare item, a player must invest time and effort. The value of an item depends on how difficult it is to obtain. In a game like RuneScape, you can trade. To get a rare item, like the orbital crossbow in the top right corner, you have to kill a high-level boss. The drop rate on the boss is roughly 1 out of 500. It takes strong gear and a little bit of skill to be able to kill the boss in 2 minutes. The average player can earn about 1 million gold pieces per hour. The orbital crossbow is worth 22 million GP. Simple math alone will tell you that a good player can earn more than 1 million GP per hour if they kill the boss 500 times, which would mean they're very unlucky, and then they happen to just get the crossbow on the 500th kill. With this in mind, you can conclude that the skill required to kill the boss is equivalent to the potential of a reward. In the Destiny universe, however, you cannot trade, so there really isn't an in-game economy. To get a rare item like an AS Luna, you need to do the corresponding activity a variable amount of times. This could mean you could play 1 game, or you could play 1,000,000 games. Nobody really knows the drop rate. I'm sure somebody did it on the Reddit at some point, but for now, let's just say it's crazy. It was crazy for me. Now keep in mind that your performance from game to game does not affect the drop rate. So you could just put your controller, put a rubber band around the thumbstick, and run in circles and still have a chance to get the Luna, or you could get in the Crucible, drop 50 kills a game, never die, and still not even be closer to obtaining that Luna. Essentially, one player could get lucky and get the weapon, and another player could never see it. Think Gjallarhorn in Destiny 1. I mean, that gun took hundreds of hours to obtain, and when I finally got it, I didn't think, oh, yay, Gjallarhorn. I was dead silent because I didn't want to piss off my teammates who still, after 1,500 hours, never saw a Gjallarhorn. If we go back to that RuneScape scenario, even if the drop rate was something insane for the crossbow, like 1 out of 1,000,000,000, the average player could still trade his way up to obtaining the crossbow. Think again that Gjallarhorn situation, if you could maybe trade Glimmer for weapons. Maybe after 1,500 hours of grinding strikes, they would have accumulated enough Glimmer to trade for any weapon in the game that they wanted, let alone a Gjallarhorn. The one thing that'll stick with me from Destiny 1 is all the stories, all the videos and complaints I hear of one player getting 5 perfect Lunas and another player never even seeing the gun in the first place. Saw it all over Reddit. You hear it all the time. When you really stop and think about it, the RNG kinda sucks. The destiny, in a sense, is out of the player's control. Now, you could argue that you have to sink time into even getting lucky, like the more games played equal the better chance of getting a Luna, whatever. Hardcore players would rejoice at this concept. They could have an advantage over casual players. But I don't think casual players would really enjoy that. They wouldn't be happy. You know, they would feel cheated. They paid good money for this game, and they're limited because they can't put as much time into it. I mean, they have a job, they have a family, they have things to do. But let's say that the casual player happens to get lucky. Let's say within the first 5 hours of playing, they get that perfect Ice Luna. And then the hardcore friend that they have is gonna complain because he thinks that he got cheated. His time's devalued. I'm gonna go ahead and clarify in this section that if a casual player is complaining about not having the skill to do something, that is entirely different from saying that they don't have the time to do something. At the end of it all, the fact remains, Destiny is out of their control. Cammy, if you're so smart, why don't you fix the game? Okay, I'll give it a stab, I suppose. So here's my proposed solution. Separate PvP and PvE balancing. They haven't seemed to even got it close to right in the last 4 years, so I just don't think it's gonna happen. Next, I would say implement trading. I know Bungie is probably afraid of people using real-life money to trade for items in-game, and that's spiraling out of control, so you could at least make a compromise system. In this system, let's say 2 players are playing Crucible. One player has 5 Ice Lunas, the other player has none. When a Luna drops the endgame rewards and both players happen to be in a fire team, player 1 has 2 minutes to trade that AS Luna to player 2, because he's a cool friend. The next thing I'd change, and I hate to say it, especially after making such a well-winded, backed up last video, but anyway, bring back RNG roles. The reason that I say this is, although I'm personally against RNG roles, the vast majority of the player base seems to enjoy them, and without a vast majority of the player base, we don't have a Destiny to play in the first place. So, the compromise system might be to let endgame activities reward a player with working around the RNG. Think Flawless Raider. So maybe once a month, if you can do Flawless Raider, you get to customize the perk of a weapon or something. That way you can work towards something and have your work be rewarded. And again, on the theme of compromise, we need to appeal to all the different players that Destiny attracts. We can't alienate any of the community. So I say create fixed weapons only for ranked PvP. The reason that you can't simply just disable perks in PvP is because everyone will gravitate towards the same weapon that has better stats. This could lead to headaches for balancing PvP, and would again just waste development time that they could otherwise be spending in making cool stuff for PvE. So if you fix a problem before it's even a problem, you have more time. Finally, you would create an actual endgame where time invested is equivalent to rewards. Add leaderboards, add difficulty options. Again, I like my idea of a Nightfall strike playlist where getting successive strikes done in a row lead to bigger rewards. And they would have random modifiers, so maybe you might get lucky and get 3 easy strikes in a row, or you might get unlucky and get a very difficult hard strike. If you truly consider yourself a skilled player, you should be able to hold some pretty big streaks in this playlist, and it should be captivating, enthralling, interesting. Well, that pretty much concludes this video. If you liked anything that I mentioned in this video, the best way to spread the ideas is to actually spread the ideas, so please share this video around.